Yesterday, we talked about the subject of pigeons. Today, I want to talk to you about figs. So we're going to be back in the book of Mark chapter 11, which is where we were yesterday. Mark 11 is pretty neat in that it covers events from Monday, but also covers events today, which would be Tuesday. So we see 2 days referenced in here, and we're actually going to start a couple of verses before what we read yesterday. So in verse 12, it says, "On the following day when they came from Bethany, he was hungry," that being Jesus. "And seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to see if he could find anything on it. When he came to it, he found nothing but leaves, for it was not the season for figs. And he said to it, 'May no one ever eat fruit from you again.' And his disciples heard it." And then the next couple of verses reference what we talked about yesterday. It talks about the cleansing of the temple, the flipping of the tables. And then we pick up this fig story again in verse 20. It says, "As they passed by in the morning," letting us know that it's now Tuesday, "they saw the fig tree withered away to its roots. And Peter remembered and said to him, 'Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed has withered.'" And there's a lot of questions we can ask in this passage. Questions are great when you're evaluating biblical text. For example, why is this story about the fig tree bisected by the cleansing of the temple? Why was it all grouped together? Perhaps there is a bigger illustration going on than just figs and just the temple. Why was it that Jesus was mad at a fig tree for not having fruit when it wasn't the season for fruit? Was it that Jesus was just hangry, and because he hadn't eaten anything, he got really frustrated and decided to curse a tree? I don't think that's the case. So when we look at this, we got to have an understanding of how fig trees work. And fig trees are pretty unique in the fact that oftentimes they will produce fruit before they produce leaves. And so leaves would be a sign of fruit. And we don't know exactly what kind of fig tree this is, but we know that there were leaves. Jesus was drawn towards it, yet it was not the season for figs. And so this is what most likely was going on. Fig trees can oftentimes produce buds around the month of March, and then in April start to produce leaves, and then in May start to produce fruit. Now that can change depending on the year and the weather and all the other circumstances, but that's a typical rhythm that you would find. And so if Jesus saw a tree that had leaves on it, he would have known that if it was out of season, that meant that the buds were already present. And these buds weren't just little nubs that existed for no reason. You can actually eat them. They're edible buds, and they have incredible properties to them. You can nerd out and Google all the benefits of buds in a fig tree, the digestive help that it can give you, can help with your sleep. You can actually use it to cure warts, in case that is an issue that you need help with right now. But what Jesus was most likely doing is he was walking up to this tree because he saw it in leaf, and he would have known that there were buds on that tree, and he could have eaten the buds. But although it had the appearance of having something that could sustain him, when he got there, he saw that it was actually an empty shell. The leaves were evidence that there was fruit, but in fact, there was no fruit or buds for him to be able to eat. Additionally, if the tree did not produce buds, that also meant that it would not produce figs later in the year. And so Jesus sees this example of something having the appearance of substance, but actually lacking it in reality. And then he goes into the whole temple moment we talked about yesterday, and then they revisit this fig tree again on Tuesday. And what that tells us is that Jesus is not just talking about figs. He's not just talking about the temple. He's creating a bigger story for us, letting us know that there's a problem when the people of God have the appearance of holiness, the appearance of faith, yet they actually lack the substance to back it up. And we see that so often in the church. Like you think about Easter for a second. Easter is the season when so many people show up at the church. And I'm not against that by any means. I would rather people show up once a year than no times a year. But what happens when people show up just once, or maybe it just means you show up on a weekly basis, but you lack the undergirding of it? All you're doing is showing a demonstration that you might have faith, but actually lacking the substance to back it up. And so as you're preparing for Easter this year, and as you're examining your heart, and yesterday you were looking at your prayer life, take some time today to examine, do you have the substance to back up your faith? Or is everything you're doing just a facade to try to give the appearance that you do have faith? Because Jesus is not interested in the show. He's interested in your heart. And this is a warning to the people of God that if we are people that have the appearance of it but lack the heart, Jesus actually doesn't want anything to do with that. He is after our heart and not our performance.